name is Elizabeth Strauss, and I'm one of the two coordinators of the CRiHHI seminar series. And I'd like to introduce Dr. Olivier Ferlatte. He is a postdoc fellow with the Men's Health Research Program in the School of Nursing at UBC and has over 15 years of experience working in sexuality, minorities, health, and promotion. His research focuses on the relationship between marginalization, violence, and social and health inequities among sexual minorities. And he is the director and lead researcher of the Still Here project, which is what he'll be talking about today. Welcome, Olivier. Yay!
Yeah, thanks for the warm welcome. Did that go away? This little...
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh, wait, there it is. And thank you for people that are here and people online. Before I start with my formal program, I just want to take a few seconds to acknowledge that we are on the unceded traditional territory belonging to the Musqueam First Nation, a group that's also highly impacted by suicide. And also there are sexual minorities as well that are belonging to First Nation. We need to think about their experience as well. So today I've been invited to talk to you and maybe inspire you about maybe using photovoice in your own work, which is something that I've been working on over the past couple of years, trying to investigate the issue of suicide among sexual minorities. And if you have questions or anything during the presentation, feel free to kind of interrupt me, since we're a small audience. So this is kind of the agenda that I have planned. So I thought I would just kind of give you a bit of context of why looking at the issue of LGBTQ2S, which is lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, two-spirit, plus, meaning other sexual minorities, suicide. So why looking at this issue? And then kind of give you a very kind of brief introduction to what is photovoice, giving you an example of how we apply photovoice in our work. And then I was going to talk to you about, what I think is the most exciting part of photovoice, which is the knowledge translation that can flow from this work. And then I'm going to talk to you about what I think are some of the challenges and the lessons that we've learned along the way with the project. And then, we can follow up with some questions or comments, or you can throw things at me if you want. So that's kind of your part. So before, I believe it's very important to talk about the topic of suicide because not talking about it and the science around suicide is actually playing an important role in isolated people that have suicide thought. But I just want to make sure that we know that people know where to go if they feel triggered by any of the content of the presentation. So this is the number for the crisis line in British Columbia, or if you know someone that's not in BC or someone on the line that's not in BC, on the suicide prevention website, you can have a list of all the crisis center across Canada. But also you can connect with me, and that's my email if you feel you want to debrief anything in it, but I just want to point out that I'm not a counselor, but I can help guiding you to services, or if you just want to debrief some content. So it's very interesting for me when I started doing work and transition. I come from the field of working in HIV and AIDS, and when I decided to kind of focus more on mental health and suicide among LGBTQ2S adults, a lot of my friends or colleagues were kind of telling me like, oh, you're going to be working with youth from now on. You're not going to be focusing in adults. And I was kind of a bit surprised by that reaction. So suicide among queer people or LGBTQ people is often framed as a youth issue. But in fact, there's an inequity. Queer youth are more likely than cisgender and heterosexual youth to experience suicide, but this inequity actually does not go away with adulthood. And in fact, there's over 100 empirical studies that have shown that LGBTQ people are at increased risk of suicide. And so here's the kind of a summary of like the statistics from different systematic reviews and article. In the general population, about 1 in 20 adults will attempt suicide in their lifetime. When we look at lesbian, gay, and bisexual, this rate is about 1 in 5. 1 in 5, so 20% will attempt suicide in their lifetime. And when we look at transgender population, this rate is even kind of higher. 1 in 2 transgender, according to survey data by Greta Bauer in Ontario, have attempted suicide in their lifetime. This is what is puzzling to me is that despite this inequity that's been reported for the last 50 years, we do not have a lot of intervention. We have no targeted intervention in Canada to prevent suicide among this population. In comparison, this is some work that I've done I just wanted to give you a comparison because sometimes people say, well, there's more pressing issue, you know, and one of it is the HIV/AIDS epidemic affecting gay and bisexual men. But I worked on a paper with some colleagues where we estimated the number of deaths among gay and bisexual men, and we compare according to suicide and HIV. And if the red line is the HIV death among gay and bisexual men in Canada, as you see, has been declining, and of course, this is due to the advancement of treatment. But then we are seeing that suicide actually, there's more suicide death, which is the blue line, among gay and bisexual men in Canada. The main hypothesis, if you look at the research, is that gay and bisexual men queer people are experiencing higher rate of suicide because of transphobia, biphobia, and homophobia. But I think there's not a lot of article that ask actually sexual minorities, what do you think what are the reasons for which you actually attempted suicide? And this is one of the kind of one only example that I can find in the literature that asks directly people what they think. And this is a survey that was done of gay men in Switzerland. And what's interesting is that actually, as you can see, there was a lot of different reasons for why a sexual minority, and this is the top 5 reasons why they attempted suicide. And sometimes they had multiple reasons, right? It might not just be, it might be multiple factors. But being gay was actually only a factor for about 16%. So there's other things going on that we don't really know about in the life of sexual minorities. One of it might be related to different aspects of identity. And I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with intersectionality, that we need to not look, at just one factor and consider, like diverse social position within a community. And this is work that we did from a survey called Sex Now, which is a survey of 8,000 gay and bisexual men across Canada. And what we find is that there was kind of 3 pockets of gay and bisexual men. This work, it was just on men, but there was 3 pockets of bisexual men that were at increased risks of suicide. One of it was bisexual men that are partnered with a man. One of it was Aboriginal men, Indigenous men. And one of it was men with lower education and income. So really, this work is pointing out that we need to consider, other social location of sexual minorities. So we were interested in kind of advancing this work. What are the self-perceived causes of sexual minorities who have attempted suicide, but also kind of better understanding what are the diverse factors, including factors related to aspect of identity, but also power. And we decided to employ photovoice. So what is photovoice? I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with that, but photovoice is an innovative participatory action research method that's kind of in a tradition of visual use visual data. It started by Wang and Burris were the first to use this method in rural China, and they were trying to kind of get a sense of the health experience and health needs of women in rural China, a population whose voice was not really being heard. And now photovoice has now really evolved over the years as being a methodology that people can use to really try to draw attention to the voice and expertise and knowledge of different communities impacted by social and health inequities. So usually, how the project is done is by providing cameras to a member of a community so they can voice their concern and experience, and then they can describe their experience by narrating their photograph. But the most exciting part is then you have a collection of photographs that can be used to promote social change. There are many advantages to use photovoice, and I think the most important one that I think is that it really helped disrupt power within the context of research, because since the participants are actually deciding what to photograph and then what is discussed into the interview, it limits the influence of the researcher who come with a predetermined like research guide or question guide. So instead, the participants are the one deciding and really leading the conversation. It also can increase the participation of people who might resist or not be comfortable answering, surveys or participating in usual interview, because it offers them another mean, so they don't have to only rely on words to describe their experience. And because people don't have to only rely on words, sometimes it is a great method for people to actually discuss complex or sensitive issues that are also taboo. And again, as I want to emphasize, it really offers a unique mechanism to promote policy change and inform intervention. So still here as a project that we started about 2 years ago, and it was really to help draw attention to the issue of LGBTQ to suicide, and also to try to get more information about, what are the causes of suicide among this population and what can be done also, because the ultimate goal of what I'm interested in doing this work is like, can we do some intervention? And what is clear from the literature, there's not a lot of attention of what are solutions to the high rate of suicide for that population. So the project actually started with gay and bisexual men, and we recruited 29 gay and bisexual men, and 21 were men who had personal experience of suicide, so they thought about suicide or had attempted suicide in the past, and we had another 8 gay and bisexual men who had lost another community member to suicide. And how we did the project, and there's many ways of doing photovoice, and I think a common way is to do focus group, but because of the sensitive nature of suicide, but also because, the gay and bisexual men community is pretty small, so to protect the anonymity of the participant and make them, we actually decided to, instead of doing one-on-one interviews, so people don't have to disclose their experience to a large group, and it seems to be working well. And it was a very successful project, and at the beginning we were receiving a lot of women contacted us because they also wanted to share their experience. So we were successful in lobbying the health authority in Vancouver, who PHSA and Vancouver Coastal Health, who provided us with money to extend this work to queer women. And now we have interviewed as well 25 queer women who have shared their experience through the same mechanism. So now I'm going to discuss with you some of the broad themes that we're finding among the photograph and the narrative of the participant. When we're trying to identify what are the causes of suicide, many of the participants pointed to their past history of violence. The majority of participants experienced some form of abuse or violence during their childhood or early adolescence that they linked to a lot of their adulthood difficulties, including their suicide ideation. One that was extremely common, particularly among the queer men participant, was history of abuse and bullying in school. The person who took this photo was a 39-year-old gay and bisexual man, and he took this photo of his school and he captioned it where it all started. So for him, all this trouble in life started the day that he started high school. From day one, he was teased and bullied, and also like physically assaulted and even sexually assaulted in his school because of his sexual identity. He ended up leaving school when he was 16, and because just to escape what he described as hell. And then he was diagnosed with PTSD, anxiety, depression, and he started cutting himself as a way to kind of alleviate the pain. And while the story of the person who took this photograph is probably one of the most intense. Those narrative of being bullying and by other boy in school were actually common among queer men.
Olivier, can I just ask, if you don't mind, did the participant enhance the photo to have it look that sort of?
Yeah, so this participant, it was not a requirement, but this participant decided that he wanted to edit his photo to kind of make it kind of look more dark and I guess overexposed in this context. So yeah, I didn't touch the photo myself.
Yeah.
So those are the
Did
work.
he speak to
The participant.
what that reflected about his experience, how he worked with the actual image itself? Or?
I don't think he did specifically. Yeah, it would be interesting to. So while many experienced violence, other kind of did not experience violence directly, but were often impacted by societal homophobia, biphobia, and transphobia, and felt a lot of isolation because of their sexual identity. And then this was taken by a young man who expressed how he was in the closet and couldn't come out about his real identity, which kind of really isolated him from his family, but also prevented him from building a social network of other people that could understand and connect with him. So social isolation was very important in the narrative of the participant of why they also consider suicide as an option. Also, one theme that was very important that came across in many photographs and narrative of participants was stress related to finances. So there's often this narrative like promoted in the media that queer people all have like very high paying job and we all have a lot of disposable income, but this is not the case. And actually what's interesting is that often in looking at the narrative, life course narrative of the participant, a lot of them had very little mean of having a high paying income because often they had to stop their education to escape violence or to leave a small town where they were bullying or where it was not acceptable to be gay. And then, they would move to a big city without an education. Often the city was Vancouver, and most of the case of the participant, high cost of living, and create a lot of stress. And a lot of them had struggled with finances all their life or being in low-paying job. To describe the importance of finance, the financial struggles in the life of this participant, he took a photo of his mailbox, which he wanted to have in black and white because for dramatic effect. I remember him talking about this, but also to kind of describe the feeling that he experienced when he opened his mailbox. For most of us, we open our mailbox and grab the mail or the bill, and I don't know if people get a lot of mail these days. I don't. But he described that, when he was opening his mailbox, it was like a huge source of anxiety because he would see all the bill that he had to pay. What's interesting with this participant, he was also bisexual, and he was partnered with both a man and a woman. So compared to a lot of other participants, he also had some responsibility that are typical to a male, where he had to provide to a family. So for him, it was a huge source of anxiety. But even other men who did not have those responsibilities felt the pressure to be successful. And then if they were not successful in the workspace, this was a huge source of failures that really affected their mental health. Another theme that was very important in the narrative of the participant was mental health stigma. A lot of individuals described that when they talk about their mental illness, they were judged, they were dismissed by other. This was the case of this woman here who actually took a photo of her in her bath, and she captioned the photo, "Despite popular belief, a bath bomb does not cure mental illness," which was something that, if sometimes you hear if you're depressed, oh, just have a good bath, go have a walk outside, and not taking very seriousness of the disease. This photo was taken by one of our male participants, and he described how, when he disclosed his mental illness to some friends, or when he was depressed, all his friends deserted him. So he was like, just felt like garbage, and that's why he took a photo of an alley with a dumpster. And you can read the quote here. So really, so this was this kind of ongoing challenges where people, this person had already lost his whole social network of his family because he had come out as gay. And then, later on in life, he lost his social network again because of his experience with depression and mental illness. Also, I want to point that, although it's very, the first photographs I've shown are very dark, but actually I was kind of surprised about the amount of resilience and strength in our participants. So a lot of them have experienced a lot of trauma, a lot of violence, a lot of rejection, struggle with mental illness, difficulty of accessing mental health services, but they are still here, like our project. And a lot of them have found a way to cope, and a lot of them are showing extremely a lot of resilience, and have learned to accept themselves. And a lot of them have actually find alternative way of managing their suicide thought and ideation. And some of them included, for some men, challenging kind of masculinity and kind of engaging in self-care, like painting your nails and doing spa day, or connecting with their friends. Taking care of a pet was often actually a huge source of comfort for individual, or just connecting to, gay culture, or actually doing art that was often a form of expression that people felt was very useful for them to voice, their experience, or just to kind of relax. So for some people it was, just using the coloring book. A lot of people also did journaling as a way to better their mental health. And also some people did drag, for example, as a way as well to kind of counter stigma, but also improve their self-esteem and kind of and make themselves better. And actually, it's very interesting. So we can think in the design of intervention. Every time we talk about designing intervention for marginalized population, we're also focusing on like rectifying the deficits. So how is this resilience? Is it just an untapped resources on which we can build intervention, and how foster resiliency among this group? So now I want to move on to some of the knowledge translation activities that we're doing, and I think this is the most exciting part of our project. We've received over 500 photographs that were contributed by our participants, so there's a lot of photos, and I've only shown you 5. And I think there's a way, so we've been trying to use the photograph to kind of raise awareness around the issue and try to actually lobby policymakers, but also educate the public around this issue, and also educate the queer community and health professionals working with the queer community. So we hosted a few exhibits of our photograph. We have one in September on campus at the CRiHHI Gallery, which is in the Nest. We also have one at Gallery Gachet in the last fall, and where we exhibited the photo and have the caption under the photograph. And those exhibits brought, each of them, those 2 exhibits brought about 600 people that walked through the exhibit. We were also able to bring affluent policymakers into the space. The first exhibit that we had was in conjunction with the BC Gay Men's Health Summit, so we organized an event where attendants from the conference came to the exhibit. We also find that, what was very powerful, and I spent a lot of time in the first exhibit that we had in the space, and, what it was very interesting to see is how a lot of people have stories to share around suicide. And watching the photograph, given an opportunity of people to learn about the issue, but also it create a safe space where people feel they can share their stories in a way that's, just productive and safe to do. In addition to the photograph, we also did a very interesting partnership where we partnered with a visual artist, Foster Eastman, who's interested in social justice, and we paired him with 5 participants. And then we had a meeting where he had discussion with the participants about their stories, and we reviewed the photographs. And then And then they went on and they built an art piece that based on their stories and photographs that were also part of our exhibit. One of it is this one, which is called a balancing act, which this this sculpture was done by a participant who had lost a friend, and he saw his friend really struggle to get health care. He had to jump a lot of hoops, and it was very difficult for him to find appropriate services that were understanding of his drug addiction, services that were understanding of his sexuality. So he had this photo of those rocks that we often see, on the seawall in Vancouver, and he had like little antidepressant pills, and just kind of how this culture is trying to signify the difficulties of having, finding this mental health services and accessing appropriate care. Another art piece that emerged from this collaboration was this one, which was based on a series of photographs that were a bit similar, which is called A Day in the Inside, and trying to this person through his piece was trying to describe how he felt when he was depressed, always kind of like having this thing over himself that he was not able to take off, and going through a lot of emotions. Sometimes it would go to, I had 40 emotions in one day, so trying to describe that experience. One thing that we did, and I have a copy here, is that we also, those exhibit obviously are they exist and they close. So as a way to extend, the exhibit, we also created a book of the photograph with the caption of the participant. We also asked some of the participants to write essays for the book, and then we've used also those books for, we've heard of counselors that we give it to some queer counselors so they can use the book to talk about suicide in their practice, but also put it in the hands of policymakers. We also have a website where you can see some of our photographs, so we have an online gallery that has reached, thousands of people worldwide to come and engage with the photograph. And then we also produced a short film, which I was hoping to show today, and I think we have time. It's about 6 minutes, based on one of the participant experience of doing this art piece. And what's very interesting is the film now has been picked up by some festivals, so it's been shown at some queer film festival in Winnipeg and here, and it was just picked up by a nonprofit that show videos around mental illness in the U.S., and they want to show our video in school, and the video is it's very interesting to have in school because it speaks a bit about the issue of bullying.
Once I left high school, I was struggling with just immense depression and anxiety, and when you get to a point like that, you get desperate and you look for any way to relieve that.
How often did you cut yourself when things were bad?
I'm 20 to 50 more.
The Man Up Against Suicide project, part of it is to work with gay and bisexual men who have struggled with depression, suicide, or have lost a male in their lives to suicide. My job is to help facilitate and to create an art piece that helps tell their story. I think this is as a cluster is nice because it almost looks like a bracelet. Yeah. Right? And then up here, we can, let's next see that. Jason's experiences as a young man, as a boy, are horrific.
I was born in Fernie, British Columbia, which is a small town by the BC-Alberta border. It was about around grade 5 where I noticed that I was having feelings towards boys. My classmates started teasing me, calling me names. Everyone throws the term bullying around like it's a common thing, and that is something that everyone experiences. But what they don't realize is that, if you're being beaten up constantly, sexually assaulted, that's just plain criminal abuse. The cutting was never about dying. I never ever wanted to die. But when I started cutting, it relieved a lot of the pain and suffering. It was kind of like being on medication. Neil told me that he just expected to come home and find dead.
And Neil's been with you for how many years?
Next year will be 20 years.
Wow. So you've been through a lot together.
Yeah.
What do you think? Art does open up dialogues and makes people feel comfortable to talk about something that is very difficult to talk about.
When I first met him, of course, I saw the beauty in him right away, but I also saw the challenges and the pain in his eyes. So to watch him blossom like this now is just an amazing thing. The courage to do this, particularly this topic, suicide with gay men, it's something we don't talk enough about. So I'm so proud of him right now. I'm so happy. Everyone I invited came and they're all so proud of it. And I didn't think it would be so impactful. I don't think it took bravery. I just feel it's something I had to do.
As disturbing as the stories are, I think projects like Man Up Against Suicide help. We need to talk about it. And if we can do that through art, we can actually open up our audience, and it just creates an atmosphere where people can actually talk about something that's very difficult.
So yeah, so this is her short film. Sorry, it's a bit intense for lunchroom. I don't know. I've seen it so many times, but I feel like I still get emotional watching him. But what's very interesting about Jason's story is how actually he became a huge advocate around suicide prevention. He's been talking in different venues, and he's been invited to different forums. So it was kind of interesting to see that impact that I did not thought would have on our participants. And actually, it had. That was not what I was going to talk about it, but it's interesting to see also the impact. It has an impact on the participants because a lot of them have never shared their stories. A lot of them have never talked to anyone about their suicide ideation or their attempt. So it was the first time they talked to someone, or they talked to someone that was also queer or that was not judgmental. So right now, we're in the fall, we actually launch a Facebook and Instagram account as a way to kind of reach more people and try to engage people around the topic of mental illness and suicide in the LGBTQ community. And you can follow us on Facebook if you want, or on Instagram. And also what's very interesting in terms of trying to influence policies, that we were really able to get some media attention to the project here and actually also abroad. We're featured in a magazine in the UK right now, which is kind of interesting. And then, we've seen the media were interested in picking up the story, so helping us really to kind of also reach out. And, I think this is our fear sometimes, and I'm sure others that are working with marginalized population feel like this, but the great thing about the project is also the media story, because often you don't have a lot of control when the journalists decide to pick up your story. They really focus on the positive, the strengths of the participant that shared their story and the need, instead of focusing on why this and kind of a blaming a population, which has been my experience a lot in my work in HIV/AIDS, where like every time a journalist, you make an interview, you try to be positive, you try to show the structural issues, but then they talk about what gay men are not doing, right, wearing condoms or stuff like this. But in this context, we saw that it was really about like the amazing strength of gay and bisexual men and standing up for suicide, even from place from like CTV, right, that I don't consider a very critical news outlet in general, right? So just to kind of wrap up my presentation, because I think some of you might be interested in picking up this work, or you might be interested, okay, like this sounds like a very beautiful story, what are some of the challenges that you experience, or what are some of the lesson learned? And actually, throughout the project, we had some obviously there's some ethical challenges. And Jen Crackton, who was a postdoctoral fellow with the project, wrote a very brilliant article that you should look up in Qualitative Health Research about this. But there's issue about the anonymity of participant, and that you need to take into consideration, and also the anonymity of the people that they may photograph. So we made sure always that people have consent. People were allowed to submit the photo for only the research part of the project, so people had really a say about where they wanted their photo to be used. Also, some of the issue that you may have is in the context of, right now, where anyone can take a photo anytime, and if you put those photos online, those photos are there to stay, and they may not, and some people may actually take your photo and use them in different contexts. And we had an example in the paper that we were describing where someone saw a photo and decided to use it in the context of a documentary that they were doing, without asking our permission, but also the permission of the person who took the photograph, because we consider the photo are actually not the photo of the project, they are the photo of the photograph, and they give us consent to use their own material. But also what's interesting is a lot of them have posted their photo on Facebook, so as a way to kind of also help us. And also the safety part, and what's very interesting about the safety part is actually, of course it's very important to consider the safety of your participant, particularly when you're dealing with a topic like suicide. And we had, we made sure that people were not experiencing suicide ideation during the time that they were participating in the project. So we asked that it was a past experience. But what we find is it was, for most participants, they talk about the very positive experience. But the safety, I think where we had more safety issue is the research team, where people who transcribe or did the interview or did the analysis were reading and reading those stories, and sometimes it can kind of open up some different emotion for sure, and being exposed to all of that. And we find that what we did for the project is we ensured that the interview is short, 90 minutes, but also we had a counselor with who every person involved with the interview was able to debrief and kind of also build mental health strategy, and not doing more than one interview a day with staff. And each one of us that worked in that interview, I think, developed our own little strategy. Mine was doing a yoga class after, every day I did an interview, I did a yoga class. So also one of the challenges is how you keep advancing participant voice, and there's a very good article about this by Evans and you and Rosenberg, who talks about, photo voice is used, but where's the voice of the participant in terms of sometimes the knowledge, even the knowledge translation after they're taking their photo, who decide which photo are taken. So in the interview process, we always ask the participant which photo they feel like they would like us to share in an exhibit or in a book or online, which one they felt that described more their story, what aspect of their story is the most important. And also, as a young academic, I get very invested in the KT, and I'm sure you can see how long, you probably have it, wow, how do you do that and then do your academic writing, right? Which is the kind of a challenge, because to kind of balancing both, because we and trying to always keep doing both was kind of one of the option. Also, funding is an issue that that we find. We were very lucky to have a very healthy budget for all those activities, because it's very expensive to do those knowledge translation activities. And luckily, I think, we were able to also get a lot of private donation. People were very inspired by the project, so thinking about that. And also, I was just reading, I wanted to kind of put that, sometimes I think okay, what's the impact that we've had in terms of lobbying change, and I think, sometimes it's a bit naive to think that one project really would lobby change. And this is one of the interesting thing. An important ethical consideration of photo voice is that often photo voice engage participants in telling them, we'll take photo and we'll have change, and, are you setting up false expectation in your participant, and I think it's very important. And I try to think that still here, although I think we're having an impact, we've been able to raise awareness of individual, in terms of having targeted prevention program. We're not there, we haven't changed any policy, but I think it's to see our project as well within, a larger kind of network of other projects that are trying to raise awareness. And we've connected with other projects as well and other professionals outside of the university. We're also kind of trying to advance this cause and trying to kind of package our evidence together. This is what we're trying to do right now. So right now, just kind of like you may be wondering, what are you doing next? We're actually trying to expand our project. We received a grant from the Canadian Foundation for AIDS Research, and we are extending this work to look at the experience of gay and bisexual men living with HIV, which is a group that has high risk of suicide, but there's not a lot of attention to the mental health need of this population, so we're trying to do this. And then we decided to kind of launch a survey. One of the issues that emerged a lot in our data was, when queer people have experienced mental illness, they find that their other friends are ill-equipped in terms of not really knowing much about depression or suicide, or have a lot of stigmatizing attitudes. So we're doing a survey to try to get a better understanding of what is the knowledge and attitude and interest as well in intervention of queer people. So I want to thank, there's a lot of people that have contributed to the project, but I'm going to thank specifically John Olive, who's the PI, our participant, and of course people that have provided funding and provided us, or some of our partners. And this is my email address if you want to connect with me, and this is also, you can view some photograph if you want on our Facebook and our Instagram account. We're putting more photo, and it's a way to stay connected with our activities. And now I think I can take your questions or comments.
Sure. Okay.